Okay. What we were about to talk about was the quality of the Buddhist monks in the United States. Mostly they're Thai. There's several reasons why you find a lot of interchange and intermixture between the Lao and the Cambodian and the Thai community, partly because of visas that uh, uh, Thai can get religious visas very easy. Lao and Cambodia, not so much because of the relationship with the U.S. government. I don't know what the present government has done with that, but that's historically the case. The Lao language and the Thai language are very close together, so there's no problem with that. But I do know of several monks who were the head monk of Cambodian monasteries, but they come from the border area. Like, for instance, Mahazamsak is from Surin, and that's a border town between Cambodia and Thailand. So uh, he's doing that there. He speaks fluent Cambodian. So um, the point that I was actually starting to make was is that the Asian people, like the Thai people, we'll just talk Thai and assume that we're talking about Lao and Cambodian also. That the Asian people have been Buddhists for centuries. They know what they're looking for. Now, when I say they know what they're looking for, we're talking about they're looking for behaviors and mannerisms of the monks, not the beliefs. But surprisingly enough, the beliefs that a monk has will influence his behavior. And that I would put uh, that in the sense of let's draw the distinction between magic and reality. Those monks who live in reality that see a real Dhamma, they find a way of practicing a real Dhamma for real results. Those monks who stay in magical thinking will depend upon magical things to make magical progress. And that magical progress, rated against real progress, can be seen. Now, we know that, but we also know that there is a mixture. There is every probability that there will be what's in the United States that, let us say, are all magic all the time. That in fact, last night I put together the idea that there are actually four layers. The four layers are at one layer is the layer which you find quite common in Thailand, and that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa is probably the best example of this. Uh, that he taught, and Ajahn Po has required of me to teach only the noble Dhamma. We don't teach any magic. If you want magic, people, in fact, this is what happened at Watsuan Mok, is that they had it set up. Anybody who wants to come and learn magic at Watsuan Mok, when they talk to one of the people who were kind of on the in group, the standard answer is, oh, well, we don't talk about rebirth and reincarnation and magic and spirit worlds and all of that kind of stuff here. But there are other temples who will. Why don't you go over there and talk to those people about it? I'm sure they'll be happy to talk to you about it. But here, we're not interested in magic, we're interested in reality. Okay. So that's kind of the top layer. Now, we also have very good sutta evidence that the Buddha taught on two levels. Mainly, he taught on two levels because everyone who comes new is going to be at the magical level, believing in Brahman beliefs, believing in reincarnation and in the law of karma and all of that kind of stuff. But also, in his youth, Gautama was taught all of that stuff. He was very highly educated, and so he knew everything that the Brahmins taught and knew. He used that to help guide them out of their magical beliefs into the reality of the Dhamma. That this is what gives rise to a lot of people, especially the way that the English language has been translated, to think that that the Buddha taught and believed in magic, where that's clearly not the case, but that rather that it's taught on two levels, and that is that the beginners, or let us say most of the lay people, will come to the temple and to do all of their pujas, all of their rituals and everything like that. And the monks who are there are noble, but they put up with them because the style is that someone who is ready for the noble Dhamma will tell you that he's ready for the noble Dhamma because of the kinds of questions that they ask. And that if people don't ask noble questions, then all they're going to get is magic Dhamma, because that's all they believe in. Okay. Now, that's kind of at the third level, that the student actually has to ask for it. But in between there, the noble Dhamma is highly mixed right in with the magic, so as to give people exposures to both sides, hoping that they'll begin to see it for themselves. But then on that third level is when, no, the student has to come to it himself. And then they ask the questions, and then the noble teachers will start teaching the noble Dhamma. The fourth kind of what will be all magic all the time. They don't even know really about the noble Dhamma. And so if a student, a Westerner, is interested in Buddhism, what they should do is to find a what that's one of these three kinds that have nobles there, because all you have to do is ask the right questions. And basically, there is a really, really interesting right question that works in the Thai. It doesn't work in Cambodia and Laos because it's a kind of a Thai thing. And that is, when I would go to the various wats and talk to the various monks, I would bring up the name of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa just to see the reaction. If they react favorably to Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, then they're noble. If they don't know Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, then there's further things to look into, like with the Lao community. That in fact, as a side story, I became involved with the Lao community simply because of the Lao Wats, that the Thai monks, the Lao, the Cambodian, there's not enough monks to go around for certain kinds of ceremonies. And for that reason, we invite the whole group. An example of that is when a Wat is fully ordained with a Bawat, which means that big fancy Thai building with the things that curve and all that kind of stuff, we'll have Sima. It takes actually 20 monks to do an ordination of a temple. Another possibility is with funerals, because people die. Sometimes we have many funerals on one weekend because everybody wants to be doing it on the weekend, so that they can have a big funeral. That requires then the monks. In fact, Mahasamsak was kind of the coordinator for the East Coast of the United States for which monks were going to go to which funerals on which weekend. He was kind of the coordinator, and he would find out who needed monks and that kind of thing. So there was a lot of interaction. And so there was a young Laotian man who had lived in the United States his whole life. He knew a bit of Lao. He was okay with it, but his main language was English. And so he and I hit it off really well, and I became his teacher. But he tattled on me. He went to his uncles. Both he had two uncles that were monks. In fact, it was because of one of the uncles that he actually ordained to become a monk, to take care of his elderly uncle. The other uncle was the head abbot of the Lao Wat in um, Denver, Colorado.
Mm.
And surprise, surprise, I get an invitation to go to Denver.
Hmm.
And not only a surprise invitation, but the other uncle and the young man we're talking about. And I went to Denver to meet the other uncle because they were so surprised that of all things, you've got not a Western monk, which was quite unusual, but this Western monk knows the Noble Dhamma. That just blew them right out. And so I became part of the in group in the Lao community and did a lot of travel with them. I feel very, very blessed that that connection happened. And so I got to know the top brass of the Laotian community. Became good friends with Achan Bunmi at Wat Lao, Washington, in D.C. So, back to the story. If a young Westerner is really interested in Buddhism, he's not going to get it from books, and he's not going to get it from Reddit. He's going to get it. In fact, if he's going to get it, I invite him to go to the Watts. We've got a lot of them. And if you go, and when I'm talking about this, I'm basically talking to the Spuds, to the pragmatic Dhamma, to the secular Buddhist, um, those people who kind of, the idea is that, oh, Asia, all of Asia is all magic all the time, and there's got to be some real Dhamma in here someplace, but we've got to go find it for ourselves. No, it's basically the real Dhamma is in Thailand, big time, has been all along. But what is being presented is the same, the magical Dhamma, which is the historical or the Dhamma of, uh, let us say, the ordinary people. And so, if the Westerners want to learn Dhamma, they should visit the temples that are available to them. If you're in Europe, I would recommend Plum Village, or I kind of don't recommend Amaravati or Abhayagiri because they're just overloaded. They're packed. There's better places to go, but that's a good place to go. But you want to practice, so you want to be far from the maddening crowd. You want to get away from it all. And the way to go is actually, we did a Zoom video about 2 months ago about how to go into a Thai Wat because we were getting, no, it was longer than that ago because we actually have Eric. Eric Zor has been now in Washington in Seattle. The abbot is a student of Ajahn Mun, but he knows Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. In fact, Ajahn Mun and Bhikkhu Buddhadasa knew each other in life, and that they're all nobles. Of course, Ajahn Mun is noble. So his student is their teach their, let us say, their practice is different, but the outcome is the same: nobility. The Buddha even said it like this in the sense of even though there are many rivers in the world that go into the ocean, once they reach the ocean, the water is the same. It's salty everywhere.
Mhm.
Okay? So it doesn't matter how polluted that river is or what was in it when it comes down, when it reaches the sea, it becomes seawater. So it's also true about the Dhamma, that it doesn't matter which path. or which canal or river that you travel down, the ocean of the Dhamma becomes the same for everyone. A clear example of that is that, and you, I don't know if you know this, but the Dalai Lama actually went to visit Bhikkhu Buddhadasa.
Hmm.
The Dalai Lama went to Thailand specifically to see Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. He scheduled another one, but by that time the Chinese government was all hot about Tibet, and so they pressured the Thai government to not give Dalai Lama a visa the second time. But
Uh,
yeah, they were. But there's Tibetan monks that would come to Wat Suan Mok on a regular basis. Okay, and yet on the surface, Vajrayana and Theravada seem almost worlds apart. It's really hard to see that, but basically they're just two rivers, but they wind up in the same ocean. So in that regard, um, Westerners should be spending time looking up, figuring out where to go, with all of the watch that we have around, um, and kind of move in, figure out how to do it, and because a lot of guys, on the other side of this whole thing is basically the issue of money in the Dhamma and how to get the money out of it. Well, this is the way. We've got a huge support group. If someone becomes really dedicated to the Dhamma, then that's what they care about.
right.
And if you find someone, even on Reddit, some guys on Reddit are really, really, they care about the Dhamma. That's their thing, which the Buddha knows about. In fact, this is what the whole uh, fruit of the Sotapan is enthusiasm, dedication, and delight in the Dhamma. So once someone has that kind of state, then they begin to look at, well, maybe I would be a Dhamma teacher. This stuff is so great, it's so wonderful, but how can I get started? Because I still have to live the Western life. I've got to have rent and all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
And some of them have family. And what I would recommend for a guy who's got family is wait until the kids get old enough and that the wife says yes. But for the guys who were single, go ahead and move into the Wat. Every Wat that I know of will take on lay people, or that they're, in fact, every Wat that I know of always has one or two Thai Asians who were not ordained living at the Wat.
What is
Why?
life like in those things?
Well, an example would be when the Christians, there was kind of a circuit because Wat Greensboro is actually close to uh, I think it was a Cabochum uh, Christian monastery
Mm.
that was not too far away. And so people would go from one to the other. And at the Cabochum Wat, they had or monastery, Christian monastery, they had a daily routine. Everybody got up at a certain hour. They had work details. They had prayers together. They ate communally, all of that kind of stuff. And so the people who would go and see that, and then they would come to our Wat, and they would say, "Well, tell me about your schedule." And I'd scratch my chin and says, "I do lunch."
I love it.
That the whole idea of the Buddhist monk is complete freedom. Freedom. That's it. If you can get freedom, then you don't need much of anything else. That in fact, much of our ignorant grasping and clinging is because deep in our hearts we want to have freedom. I mean, wouldn't you like to just spend your time the way you want to? Bet you could find some really wholesome things to do with your time if you had it completely free.
Can't argue that.
All right. So all we have to do with that then is say, well, if I can do without um, the house and the rent and all of the expenses that it takes to maintain a job, the thing to do is for a while pack up some money, get some money in advance. That would be especially necessary if you were going to choose to come to Thailand because now you need airfare. But $1,000 will go a really, really long way in the United States if all your food is taken care of. If you don't really have any, in fact, the only reason you need money is for the lingering greed you still got. And so if we can get these Dhamma dudes that are really interested and want to be around others in the Dhamma, because that's another. In fact, this is the really big issue, is that all of these people who are becoming interested in Buddhism, we don't have a Sangha. In Thailand, it's a huge Sangha. Any monk can basically go to any temple and become friends there. All of the head monks know each other from all of the various Wats. In fact, I don't have any actual hard evidence, but I've got some good psychological foundation evidence about Eric that Achan Reet and Achan Bun, because we introduced Eric to Achan Reet, but
Mm.
his temple is too far out of Seattle. So I said, well, why don't you go to the other temple and meet Achan Bun? And so I'm sure that Achan Bun and Achan Reet were communicating with each other. You know, it's just a telephone call away. And the next thing you know, Eric is right in.
Hmm.
And so this is how the communication goes. The Thais are completely in communication. But I knew almost all of the monks in the United States because I got to meet them several times over and over and over again. And yet here we have all of these Westerners, maybe even hundreds of thousands of people, and they don't know each other. All they've gotten is from the books. And when they get onto Reddit, it's like everywhere else on the internet is that you let your hair down and you just, it's like family. You just become your worst
Yeah.
rather than your absolute best.
It's anonymous.
Uh huh. And anonymous cat calls. And so that's much of what Reddit is. Um, and so, um, without talking about Reddit too much, but rather looking at it from the sense of community, that making friends with Asians who have been dedicated to the Dhamma for many, many years. They were well known and well selected to be brought to the United States. And so the likelihood of you having a noble around is quite high, very high. Why? Because they wind up being very good monks because they're practicing reality and getting real results rather than practicing magical things and getting magical results. Um, Actually, you can see how that kind of happens. That most Thai people um, are highly influenced by the culture that they're in. It's a matriarchal culture, and they um, actually there's a lot of wisdom in the system. But the people themselves, by and large, the vast majority of Buddhists in Thailand don't meditate.
Hmm.
They don't meditate for two reasons. One is because they have been told somehow or another, perhaps by each other, that it's too hard. And the other one is but the easy way out is to make merit, Tom Boon, so that you can have an easier time next life.
Magic.
Magic, exactly. So if many people want to know why, by and large, most Buddhists don't meditate, it's because of magical beliefs.
Mm.
But it doesn't end there. There's others, and that is that if someone says, well, I'm not really sure about all this rebirth stuff. I'm going to make sure that I find out for sure myself. And so they set up their whole meditation experience around getting their mind into a kind of a state so that they can then have what they call a past life experience.
Yeah.
Now, those past life experiences are very, very common in India because they're promoted.
Like placebo?
Um, well, when they go to the ashram and Hinduism believes in reincarnation, and you tell them, "Oh, I had a past life experience," they'll say, "Oh, tell me all about it. Oh, I want one too."
I see. So it's like they want it to happen to them, so it does,
Hmm.
kind of deal. Yeah.
Well, let us say they want it in the back of their mind, so something happens, and they
Yes.
take that event or that experience that they had, and by the time it's verbalized, it's a past life experience. They basically talk themselves into it.
I see. Yeah.
Okay. In Thailand, when one has a past life experience, let's say there's a monk at the Wat, and he has, if he's got a good teacher, his teacher will say, "That's very nice. Okay, so what?
That's
Let's
awesome.
move on now. Okay, so you had that thing, all right. So, but no big deal.
Hmm.
Don't lust for it or want more of it, because if you do, now you've taken a sidetrack that, in fact, not meditating at all, or number two, meditating for greed reasons. Like a clear example, in fact, would be wanting enlightenment.
Yeah.
Well, people who want enlightenment have already invented a magical definition of the word enlightenment, and now they want it. If they understand enlightenment correctly, like the Zen teacher will say, you're already enlightened. Sit down, relax, and enjoy the fact that you're already enlightened already. But if you want enlightenment, now there's a struggle. Now there's a desire. Now there's a want. So, in that regard, uh, that it becomes a hindrance. That and so this is probably why the Buddha put um, personality view as the very first fetter. So long as people believe in rebirth and reincarnation, they will have side trips into magical belief that will keep them from practicing the path correctly. And that much of the path then is to come to the position of the personality view is that no, I am not permanent. I do not last forever. That in fact, uh, a really good understanding of why the Buddha taught the five aggregates is because the five aggregates are actually the things that make up the personality that we all have: the body, the feelings, our consciousness, our memories, and how we construct our reality, perception. Those five things, each one of them is free from a self. There's no self in any of that. However, I don't know if you've heard about it, but there's an aspect of science called general systems theory.
Yeah, I think I have heard of that.
Okay, and the one of the premises of general systems theory is that a system is organized in such a way as to produce something, And so the first premise then is that the whole of the system is greater than the sum of the parts. An example of that would be with Melinda and Nagarjuna and their chariot. You probably heard the story where Nagarjuna asked King Milinda's permission to take the chariot apart because he was trying to describe this idea. And so they actually did it. And so they had the army soldiers and whatnot take the wheels off, put them over there, take the ridgepole, put it over there, take the basket, put it over there. And so now Nagarjuna asked King Belinda, "Where's the chariot?"
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Took me a second, but yeah, I got you. I got you.
Where is the chariot? Okay, so we can do that with a modern automobile. You can take the engine out and the wheels over there and the steering wheel and the seats and whatnot like that. And you can imagine that probably a good example going along with the chariot is the very first cars, something like back to the Model A.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because that was a very simple car. But what it had together when it was a car, when it became a system, is now that system is greater than the sum of the parts. What is it that makes a car unique when it's all assembled and put together correctly? Is transportation. Now, everything about that car you can put in a box, big enough box, okay? You can put it in a box, you can paint it red. However, transportation, you can't put in a box and paint it red. Transportation is a concept.
Mm-hmm.
Transportation actually doesn't exist in that kind of reality. But it's a concept that we humans have, transportation, okay? So the self is actually very much like the transportation of your aggregates. You put all of those things together, and there's something new that's created. And you could call that, if you're going to be high class, you could call it a human being. And at low class, you could call it me, you. All right? But in fact, there are no aggregates there. Oh, excuse me, the aggregates are there, but there is no inherent self anywhere among them. Just like there is no transportation among all of the various components of that chariot as they're laid out in all of their bits and pieces. It's only when things come together that transportation arrives. Okay, so this is what the Buddha's teaching is all about, in the sense that we have to get over this concept that I am, and that magical thinking actually supports an I am.
Yeah.
You could go so far as to say that the basis of magic is me, I am. That's the basic piece of magic. If we will believe that, we'll believe anything. Why? Because if I believe there is a me, now I've got a job to do. I've got to take care of this me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if there is no me here, then there's not much to do anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I see.
All right. So this is the actual teachings of the Buddha, and it is really valuable for young guys who want to get into the Dhamma to start hanging out with those kind of people.
I have a thought. And I gotta get off soon here, but I just wanted to say that I think just like, and you lived in America, so I think you get this to an extent, and you were young. You're probably my age 10 years ago or something. But basically, when you're in this, when you're in the when you're in America and you're young, I feel like it's a different expectation that's placed on yourself and the society around you. So for me, like I have something that I'm trying to build towards, right? I have a business that I'm trying to build. I have relationships with people that I'm close to that I want to build. It's like personal growth, right? That's the steps that we're trying to take. And it's so incredibly hard to detach from that because that's all we know. So while I hear you say the things of like, just go to Seattle and move in, right? Like just get to know these people. Like a part of me knows that you're right, but there's another part of me that says, why can't I?
It says, that's what
Right,
it
that, but it's also like, yeah.
says.
Yeah.
I
The other
know,
part
I've
of me
been
has
there,
an
done
anxiety attack. Yeah. Uh, it's like, why can't I just practice these things, live my life, and have a balance between these two things?
Okay. So we're looking at the distinction between, let us say, a fine gourmet meal and a bucket of shit. And what you're saying is you want to put the gourmet meal in, and mix it in with this bucket of shit, and you'll be happy.
um, yeah, why can't
and
we mix
and
it?
the
Why can't
reason
we
that
just
I
have like
use
a,
that the
yeah.
reason that I use that analogy is because that's an analogy that I've heard from Achan Mahaboa.
Mhm.
Um, um, I won't go into the great detail of it, but yeah, he's actually said that that's what the world is. He calls it, in fact, a toilet of shit.
I love
But he uses the Thai word ki, which kind of makes it better because ki is a common word. Uh, just like the word shit is a very common word, but it's got dirty connotations to it. An example of the word ki would be ki bari, which is the ash of a cigarette. Okay, so, um, but still, the toilet is full of shit. That's what it is. Sorry about that. And that uh, rather than calling it shit, we could also call it dangerous. Okay, so uh, some people like danger, makes them feel alive.
Yeah.
Some of them are really crazy about it. I think that the worst of all would be a guy called Evil Knievel. Have you ever heard of him?
I have.
All right.
Stuntman. Mm-hmm.
Right. Most of us, we love the thrill until we have a really bad mess up. And after a couple of broken legs and a few weeks in the hospital and ribs that don't heal, we tend to cool it. But not Evil Knievel. No, I think they say he's busted every bone in his body, but he finally quit. He finally stopped. He retired.
But isn't there like, there's so many people that I know, not so many, but there's a lot where they're good human beings, they're happy in their life, they're living the Western life, and they're doing their thing, you know? Um, is that wrong? Is it, are they a
No, it's
pile of?
actually quite wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And in fact, this is the the big issue. You've heard me talk about this before. The real problem with human beings is the way that we raise our own children. That a really good example of how to raise a kid good is look at the Dalai Lama or many of the monks that I know of. Many have been orphans. But 100 years ago, the best way in Thailand and still in Cambodia today, the very best way for the young man to get an education is by becoming a monk because the monks read, the monks can, they're good teachers, They're good, great guys to be around. And it kind of rubs off that, in fact, you don't even have to be a tender infant or a young child being around monks to have that benefit, that it rubs off. That's part of the reason why I recommend young men who are curious and interested about the Dhamma to start hanging out at the Wat, because you're going to be hanging around with really, really high quality people. And it rubs off. If you spend all your time in a bar, you're going to be associating all your time with drunks. If you spend all of your time in jail, you'll be spending all your time with criminals.
I see.
Okay? If you spend all of your time with politicians, guess what you're going to become?
Yeah.
And if you spend a lot of your time with really, really high quality, noble people, guess what you take on? It rubs off, it seeps in. The Dhamma seeps in, just like greed seeps in, that we're susceptible to it. So, in that regard, if a child has a very, very good upbringing, he doesn't have much to do. Achan Po, for instance, has been a monk in the robe since he was 6 years old. But he never uses that time. He only uses it from the time that he was 20 to talk about him being in the robes. Before that, he was a samanin, but still he's been able to rack up 67 years as a monk, and he doesn't even have to count that 14 years before. But that's where most of the real work was done when he was a kid. That in fact, when he was quite a young man already, he was well known enough that he became, as soon as he was able, he became the abbot of Wat Suan Mok.
What's that?
Well, Wat Suan Mok is the big Wat that went around Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, and Achan Po was named abbot, I think 1969, something like that, and he has been the abbot of Wat Suan Mok ever since. 40, 50, 60 years. Not quite. Couldn't be. Like 72 or 73 then, something like that, because he's 88 now.
Wow. Well, I do have to get off. I got to head to bed, but we should pick this up in a couple of days for sure.
All right. Well, I'm glad that we had a chance to talk about it, about the community and the Sangha, that being around others and the Westerners, we don't have that much. We don't have nobles that we can go around that we know this guy knows what he's talking about and he's worth being around. Eric talks about it that he feels really lucky that he can, he's kind of become the designated driver for Achan Bun. And so anytime that Achan Bun goes out, Eric gets private time with him.
That I see. That's nice.
Yeah. So this is the quality that we're looking at, is that we've got to bring the Western Sangha out of the books and out of Reddit into the Wats. Every Wat would be willing to have folks to come and stay.
I need to go visit the one in Seattle.
I'll give you an introduction.
That'd be nice.
And you can go to both of them because there's two Wats in Seattle.
Oh, yeah. There is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's Wat Atamayata Rama, which they for short is Atamayata. And anyone who is really, really into Bhikkhu Buddhadasa knows the word Atamayata. That's the Pali word for relinquishing or letting go. And that if you dissect the word Atam Mayata, the tam is the word for do or work. Means not work. Maya means I'm not going to work with Maya. I'm not going to have anything to do with Maya. And the word ta at the end of it is an expletive. Okay?
Really?
All right. Ain't going to have nothing to do with Maya. Ta. And so I found that quite amusing that the monks there actually use that word, because that is a big billboard announcement that this wat is dedicated to Bhikkhu Buddhadasa.
That's amazing. I like that.
Okay, so and the head abbot there is Ajahn Reet, and we also have Ajahn Boon where Eric is staying. Yeah, it'd be good if you could go and visit Eric.
That would be
Spend
nice.
some time at both the wats. Go for a weekend and spend one day at each of the wats.
I could do that.
I don't know about Oregon. We'll have
I
to
don't
see.
either. I'm surprised Portland doesn't have any though. That does surprise me, considering there's a lot of spiritual people here. But Seattle's a nice place.
Well, it's got nothing to do with spiritual people. It's got to do with Thai people.
Right.
Or Lao people or Cambodian people. They're the ones who build the wats,
Sure.
not your spiritually hungry Westerner.
Yeah. That there's a distinction there. Yeah.
Well, yes, but that's this century. And that shows we've got some work to do to make some integration here, to let's put Western Buddhism back in the bucket that it came out of.
Mm-hmm. I like it.
Conor, we'll see you later.
Thank you very much. Talk soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.